Hi and welcome to the first episode of Doordarshan Explainers. I know it's a very original title, but we'll get to that, why I chose it as such. But also, why am I wearing this hat? It's pretty obvious, as you see it over here, and also Kapalamana's great hat as such. Anyway, leaving that aside. So, Doordarshan, as you all know, it is a state channel, and the way it reports on news is pretty much better than many of the private channels as well. But anyway, the way they describe about certain events, आज प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी ने प्राइम मिनिस्टर शेख हसीना से मिला था और उन्होंने कोविड के बारे में etc etc. So you pretty much know how descriptive it is, and also it's a state channel, and it's not very political as well. But mine's going to be a bit political too.
Perfect. Okay.
Anyway, with regard to the current issue at hand, I would like to begin with a small story, and many of you might know of it as a biblical story. I felt this is pretty much apt for the current topic as mentioned in the title. So, in this particular town, there were two people. There was the rich man and there was the poor man. The rich man had, many sheep and cattle, and the poor man basically had like this Eve lamp as such, and took care of it like as if it was a daughter to him, and pretty much held her on in his arms and took huge amount of respect and love for her as such. One day, this traveler came to the rich man, and the rich man had to prepare a meal as such. So what did the rich man do? Pretty obvious. He did not take one of his own sheep or any cattle in order to make the meal. He goes to the poor man's place and takes that lamb and prepares a meal out of it. So you will ask, why is this story pretty much relevant with regard to the topic as mentioned? But it's up to your interpretation as to who the rich man is, who the poor man is, and etc etc. So that is pretty much about what we're going to be talking about. The current issue, as you guessed it, it's about Lakshadweep. Why is that the hashtags trending? Save Lakshadweep. Many actors who are being brought forward, who are putting their solidarity with regard to the people of Lakshadweep. And actually, is it a political move, or is it actually something which can determine the life in the island as such? So before all of you must be knowing where Lakshadweep is. I hope so, because at least in our geography lessons we must have heard of Lakshadweep being this group of islands. It's very small islands. It's around 32 square kilometer and around 36 islands as such, and that's pretty much towards the west coast, like near the west coast, Kerala, like in the Arabian Sea as such, and it's very small. And in your geography class, you must have been learning about the capital of Lakshadweep is Kavaratti, is what we know, maybe at the maximum, or a few movies if you have seen, or many, like in Malayalam. I think there is a movie called Anarkali, or there's one more movie as such which pretty much shows the life in Lakshadweep. That's pretty much maybe our references with regard to the life in the island as such. But let's get to why this particular island is in the news. Especially with regard to this island, it's pretty small, and it's come to the limelight very right now. I don't think many of us must have been taking notice of what's happening in the island until the recent news of there were these videos of demolitions, and there was videos of protesting. You had several Congress leaders and several CPM leaders also coming forward and writing to the president, writing to the to the current dispensation. So before we get to that, let's try to discuss key aspects as to why this entire changes are happening. So the current discussion will be around what is the current statistics of the island. As you know, fun fact, it's a very small island, but the literacy of the island is around 92%. So pretty much comparable to, let's say, Kerala, next door Kerala as such. And it's when you compare it to the overall nation average, around 74% as such. And the forest covers around 90% of the entire islands. So in this island, the birth rate is around 11.81 per thousand compared to the nation average of around 20.97. And if you look at the overall poverty rate, and actually it's pretty low compared to what you see the main indicators. So that's with regard to the social indicators. But then why is it that many of you must be hearing as to there's lack of facilities with regard to higher education, so be it colleges or even be it good amount of health facilities. The people have to travel to nearby Cochin with regard to these kind of facilities. So this is what has been happening with regard to the general statistics, and the current population is around 65,000 if you could put it across. So why is it that it's brought into contention is because of these 3-4 regulations or draft regulations or acts. So let's take the first one. All of us must be hearing the term LDAR. What is LDAR? What is this Lakshadweep town and country planning regulation? So let's define it. I've gone through these particular regulations and drafts, and I've picked on these few sections. So do stay tuned to that. So section 2, which states that a government means the administrator of the union territory, which is appointed by the president under Article 239 of the Indian Constitution. So the current administrator is Praful Khoda Patel, previously part of the current dispensation being in Gujarat, and is known to be pretty close as well to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and that is one particular cause of political concern, if you could say so. Then according to some parties, then you have Section 5. Now this does seem to be one of the talked about issues, is that declaration of planning areas. So there is the constitution of the Lakshadweep Development Authority, and this with regard to these particular areas for development, as you know, they with regard to building up of educational institutions, or be it with regard to enhancing the tourism sector as such. What we see with regard to the planning areas is that the government under Section 5, the government may by their own by their amalgamation, subdivision, etc., declare any area to be a planning area for the purpose of this regulation, and this is not applied to the cantonment areas, is what has been saying, if it is included in the planning area as such. So that is something which has been brought forth, because if it declares any area as a public area for development, that it does bring some kind of concerns to, okay, usually when you try to acquire a particular land in order to build your factory or build anything, you require the basic environmental clearance, you require to do an assessment of the entire land, and so many procedural activities as such, and it takes a huge amount of time. And in this in this planning authority, this planning and development authority, it's constituted of the following members: the chairman, who's again appointed by the government is the administrator, who is Praful Khoda Patel. Then there is the town planner, who is also appointed by the government, and he shall be the member secretary of the planning and development authority, and the representatives of the local authorities. So that is one thing which is being talked about as such. Now let's get to the functions. Under Section 4, the functions of the planning and development authority, subject to the provision of the regulation, and the function of every planning and development authority, it can acquire, hold, manage, dispose of the property, immovable or movable, as it deems to be necessary. And in this development plan, this outline development plan, it's including some pretty much infrastructural projects as well. So be it railways, be it national highways, be it tramways, airports, canals, schools, colleges, private health institutions, markets, theaters, stadiums, open spaces, playgrounds, zoological gardens, national reserves. So look, you must be wondering, okay, this is like this 32 square kilometer land, and looking at where it is strategically placed, this is actually pretty ecologically protected. Several of the islands, the coral islands, must have seen several pictures, the corals as such. So these are pretty fragile ecosystems. How will it be able to hold on to these developmental projects? But what the government is trying to do is trying to develop it as the next Maldives. It's a good point with regard to why isn't this islands being utilized well enough for tourism as such. And that does come the point of these particular developmental aspects as such. So especially with regard to appeal also, within the month of coming into operation of any development plan, any person who's aggrieved by any provisions shall make an application to the district court challenging the validity of the development plan. And this is what it basically is. So now let's move to also the penalty. So now if you're obstructing the particular contractor or removing any marks, it says that if any person obstructs or molests any person engaged or employed by the prescribed authority or any planning and development authority and has entered into a contract, so basically he's empowered or required to do so like under these particular regulations, as the case may be. So if you remove any mark set up by the purpose of indicating any level or any direction with regard to the execution of the work, he shall be punishable with a fine which may extend to around 10,000 rupees, or with an imprisonment which may extend to around 2 months as such. So that's again what is being brought forward. So getting to something which is very interesting, and one of the most controversial aspects of these regulations is the second regulation, which is the Lakshadweep Animal Preservation Regulation 2021. So there, as you know, the pretty much many people in the island consume beef, and in this regulation, some may say, okay, where is it mentioned that you cannot consume beef, or where you can, like, it can be a pretty ridiculous statement to make, because if you look into it, the under section 5, there is a prohibition against slaughter without certificate, without a certificate from the competent authority, and no certificate under subsection 1, so basically with regard to slaughtering of animals, shall be granted in respect of a cow, the calf of a cow, whether male or female, whether castrated or not, a bullock or a bull. And then even section 7 is basically a prohibition against transportation of specific animals for slaughter. Now, section 8, however, does state something which you would like to take notice of: prohibition against selling or buying beef or beef products. So what it states: no person shall directly or indirectly sell, keep, store, transport, offer, or expose for sell or buy beef or beef products in any form. And whenever any person transports or causes to be transported the beef or beef products, such vehicles or any conveyance used in transporting such beef or beef products along with such beef or beef products shall be liable to be seized by such authority or officer as the administrator may appoint in his behalf, and a vehicle or a conveyance shall be seized. And for this purpose of the section, beef means flesh of any animal specified in subsection 2. As I read to you, subsection 2 is what it states. So that is one thing, like, basically with regard to the animals, be it cow, calf, bull, bullock. So basically you can't consume. If you can't sell, if you can't slaughter, if you can't buy, how are you going to consume in the first place? So that's again that's again a very frivolous argument that you can't. It's not saying that you cannot eat beef or you can't consume it. Now again, also section 9 states the power to enter and inspect premises. For the purposes of this regulation, the competent authority or authorized in this behalf shall have the power to enter and inspect any premises where the competent authority or the authorized person has reason to believe that an offence under this regulation has been or is likely to be committed. Again, when we look into this, we are pretty much legalizing what you known as this, which, like, you can plainly say, okay, come on, this is actually a state-sponsored one, wherein you are pretty much going and checking onto with regard to the aspect of beef consumption or even storing of beef as such. So that is one thing which does bring into limelight with regard to the same. And section 10, which talks about penalties. So whoever contravenes the provision of section 7, and as I read to you, section 7 is with regard to prohibition of transportation of or specified animals for slaughter, again those cow, calf, etc. And also under section 8, prohibition against selling or buying beef products, etc. shall be punished, I'm reading it to you, shall be punished with the imprisonment for a term which may extend to 10 years but not be less than 7 years, and with fine which may extend to 5 lakh rupees but shall not be less than 1 lakh rupees. And without a certificate, it will be an offence punishable with 1 year jail and a fine of 10,000 or both. Again, we look into it, and it does bring into question as to why this is what in the first place. It's part of the eating habits. So if you look into Kerala, if you look into Goa, again people might say, okay, why is the current dispensation trying to do it with regard to trying to ban beef, trying to hurt religious sentiments? Look at Goa, again there is ruled by the current dispensation. So I don't know why we should look at it in this particular case as to, no, it's the particular eating habits of the particular island. Though this is currently under draft regulation, what we look into it is as to how the public reacts to it, or how far the courts take into action. This is one more regulation which is again very controversial. I'm not referred to as the Goonda Act, or if you look into it, the Prevention of Antisocial Activities Regulation 2021, or the PASA Act. So this is with regard to provide for preventive detention of bootleggers, dangerous persons, drug offenders, immoral traffic offenders, property grabbers, cyber offenders, money lending offenders, cruel persons, depredators of environmental and sexual offenders, for preventing their anti-social and dangerous activities. I am just looking at it. What is the current statistics of the crime rate in Lakshadweep? You will be shocked to note that in the current, with regard to the NCRB, so all of you must be knowing what the NCRB is, the National Crime Records Bureau. As of 2019, Lakshadweep has zero cases of murder, kidnapping, rape, robbery and dacoity. And with regard to the number of violent incidents, 16 in 2019 and 13 cases related to liquor and drug related cases. So I'm just wondering, there is one clip from this movie which I'll be playing it right now.
Sightseeing ഇറങ്ങിയതാ.
വെറുതെ ഇവിടെ ഈ ജയിൽ എന്താ ഇങ്ങനെ?
നാട്ടുകാരൊക്കെ കൂടി പൂട്ടിച്ചതാ.
അയ്യോ, അത്രയ്ക്ക് പ്രശ്നക്കാരാ?
ആരെങ്കിലും എന്തെങ്കിലും പ്രശ്നം ഉണ്ടാക്കിയാലല്ലേ മാഷേ പിടിച്ചകത്തിടാൻ പറ്റൂ. No crimes at all.
Right.
Also, I'm just wondering, like, what is the purpose of bringing this act in the first place? Though there was a news that the Coast Guards had actually found a few drugs, also national security, but these are islanders who are very, very, very nice. If you go and see several of the travel videos and vlogs, like, in Malayalam you say they're very nalla manasolla. They're very hospitable and very nice to people as such. So again, this is one thing which one needs to really look into and administer. So even under section 3 of this Lakshadweep Prevention of Antisocial Activities Regulation 2021, section 3.1, the administrator may, if satisfied with the respect to any person with a view to preventing him from acting in any manner prejudicial to the maintenance of public order, it is necessary to do, make an order directing that such person be detained, and if having regard to the circumstances prevailing or likely to prevail within the local limit of the jurisdiction of the district magistrate, that the administrator is satisfied that it is necessary to do so, he may by order in writing direct that district magistrate may also, if satisfied as provided, exercise the powers conferred by the said subsection. Again, when we look into it, it does seem that, like, in order to bring development, there needs to be consensus among people, and agree that in this country it's very difficult to bring forward reforms. So one may say that, like example, let's take the farm laws issue as well. Farm laws, the farm laws are pretty good on paper as such, and if you go read through it, it's actually providing a space for farmers to actually sell their produce, not just in these mandis as such, but also if you don't look into this with public consultation with those states, especially with states of Punjab and Haryana or even Western UP as such, they are the major stakeholders with regard to how they have actually been able to sell their produce in a lot more better efficient manner. Because again, even if there is mistrust and misunderstanding, you should not let that misunderstanding or mistrust grow, because that will spoil or dilute the current law or regulation you're trying to build across. If you're building for the reformation of the particular island, or of the particular state, build the trust, because it's very easy to break trust, very difficult to make trust, and very easy to even mistrust somebody, or even cause a lot of mistrust among the people. And even several of the BJP leaders or party bearers, office bearers in the island have also resigned, because they also felt that okay, maybe this is actually not going in the interest of the Lakshadweep island, even if it is meant for development as such. And if you look into section 14 as well, No detention order shall be invalid or inoperative merely by the reason that the detention orders not be invalid or inoperative on certain grounds. The person to be detained thereunder, though within the union territory of Lakshadweep, is outside the territorial jurisdiction of the authorized officer making the order. This particular regulation, this is the Lakshadweep Panchayat Regulation 2021. Section 14N says that has more than 2 children, provided that a person having more than 2 children on the date of commencement of this regulation. So when it is actually being enforced, not be disqualified under this clause so long as the number of children he had on the date of such commencement does not increase. Provided further that a child or more than one child born in a single delivery within the period of 1 year from the date of such commencement shall not be taken into consideration for the purpose of disqualification under this clause. Now you may say that there are some states wherein there is this rule that you cannot have more than 2 children. Again, bring the policy in the national level. Bring the policy that if you want to say that okay, hum do, hamare do, I think you cannot enforce. If you enforce something which ought to be illegal. For example, if you are trying to enforce that and say that okay, alcohol should be banned, or like in some states you have prohibition, alcohol should be banned. Which very ironically, over here in some islands, in order to boost up the tourism, alcohol to be allowed. Though right now only one island which alcohol is allowed. Again, it comes from the administrator who is also belonging to a state where it's prohibition. Though some may say that okay, you can still get it somehow somewhere, but again, it's prohibition. So if you don't want, if you want to build tourism everywhere, build tourism across the country as such. But that's a lot more political statement again. But especially with regard to enforcing something, you can't just push it across and say okay, this has to be enforced right now and this is what it is. So drawing to the close, let us say that okay, currently the COVID crisis across the country and leaving, and for the fun fact, Lakshadweep was one of those few places considered the green zone where there was not even a single case of COVID till December 2020. Is what some people say, because what we have seen, because I remember whenever I used to check, okay, every place, even for a particular period of time, even Andaman and Nicobar didn't have cases or had very less. I thought okay, fine, maybe in some period of time we might have both these islands, because these are very strategic islands, like the reason why even this news has also come into force is because these are very strategic islands for the development of these islands. So if these islands are not to report much cases, what's really happening as such? And then right now what you're having is that the number of cases have actually increased in Lakshadweep from 0. Because before, in order to because there was no like proper facilities, so how they tried to contain the virus or try to prevent the virus from entering into Lakshadweep is basically that there were these quarantine facilities in Kochi, and in order to get to the island, you have to first quarantine yourself there, and then get to the island and again quarantine yourself again there. So people will not be ready to spend that much time. Again, it's a very safe step. But with regard to the tourism aspect, how far it goes, so that's why when that particular regulation was kind of removed, and only if you have a negative RT-PCR, you can still go in. Again, it's a very controversial aspect as to how RT-PCR is actually very useful, because you have found many cases of where people have actually found positive even after turning negative in the RT-PCR test. So this is one thing which some people might say, if you relax some laws or if you allow certain things to happen, it can change the island forever. It can change the island as what it can be. So in the end, this particular proposition of development of the island was not just brought in the limelight. It was brought like right now. Since 2019 or even before that, the Niti Aayog, as you know, is the think tank. Like previously you had the planning commission, it was removed. Like you had this Niti Aayog which kind of proposed these particular aspects with regard to inviting investors to develop the ecotourism in these islands. And also what really hit the news was also recently where the US naval, the Navy vessels kind of crossing that particular area. Like basically, as you know, the exclusive economic zone across any country, so be it any sovereign country, is defined under the UN. There is something called as the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So that basically states as to, as you as a sovereign state, so be it India, you have specific rights with regard to exploration, using it for mine resources, be it for wind or be it for energy production as well from water and wind. So you have this particular right as such, and when the US naval vessel tried to enter, it was not very met very friendly with regard to the Indian side, because it's pretty much our zone. So again, these islands, basically Lakshadweep and Andaman, were very strategically important, because China is trying to again put their dominance through the Indian Ocean, through many of our neighbors. So in order to do so, we also have to strengthen our defense, or also have to strengthen the entire aspect of sovereignty and national security of our country. But also looking into the key factor of environment, looking into the key factor of social indicators, looking into the key factor of how the public in general, especially the islanders, feel, is something what the current discussion should take. So thank you for staying tuned to this episode, and I hope if you like this episode, please do comment us, because this is actually one of our first episodes, and it might be a little long, or might be some parts which are not very clear. If you would like to state it as to what can be improved, very well happy to have you on board and try to, because we need to improve ourselves as well. And if you have any comment as well, please do put forward in the comment section. Also, you can DM us and check out our website as well. This episode will also be uploaded on our platforms. So do like and do share if you find this very useful as well. Thank you, and stay tuned to more episodes by Argumentor Podcast.